Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanisms in Fossilis, a game I backed on Kickstarter a little while ago and played for the first time very recently. Fossilis is a game that is largely about digging up dinosaur bones and building them into dinosaurs. And there's a lot of little mechanisms, like it kind of seems maybe like a kid's game on the surface, and it even has a component that looks like something you might find in a toy. But there are a lot of deep game mechanisms in this and great game mechanisms in it. So I'll jump around a little bit and mention a few of my favorites. One little thing I wanted to mention is in the rule book, I really like on the first page how it says, are you playing with young kids? And it gives you an option of a bunch of things that you could remove for that game. So the core game, they come out right away and say, like, this is the core game. This is the best way to play it. But if you're playing with young kids, feel free to consider these things. And not only do they mention these things, but they list why you might remove them. So it says, like, the tool cards. These tool cards require private reading and add tactical complexity. So if you have maybe a kid who can't quite read yet, you might remove those. Or it says... the skill tokens and hammers, they create disparity between player capabilities. So if you have players at very different levels, you might want to remove that. One that speeds up the game. I really like this little addition on the rulebook. I thought that was really, really clever. The core element of the game is that you have this big tray that is full of little fossil pieces, and they actually look like fossils. And they're down in here, and one of the things you can do on your turn is to excavate some of these fossils, and you do so. Again, this isn't really a mechanism, but I really like that they included this component. They included these tweezers for you to go down there and pinch out the tiny tokens and get them out of these holes. So you really feel like you are digging up bones. There are abstracted elements to the game, but I like that they went as far as they could to make this feel like you were really digging up dinosaur bones and adding them to your collection. So I thought that was great. One thing that I thought was really clever in terms of set collection in this game is how they dealt with what you do with these dinosaur bones. Basically, when you gain a dinosaur bone, you put it on your player mat, and it can sit there and just give you points at the end of the game. Or you can use that dinosaur bone to start working on a dinosaur. And so in many games, you might gain a card that is a goal, and so you have to try to fill this order or fill this, gather the things that you need to fill this order. But in Fossilis, you need to have the bone first before you can start working on the dinosaur. I think this works thematically really well. So here's an example of a dinosaur here with these. You need these 3 bones to complete this dinosaur. And so once you have one of these bones, you can claim this card if you see it from the middle row. And this happens to be a dinosaur with all the same bones. Here's another one with 3 different bones. So once I have one of these bones, I can claim this card if I want, if I'm not already working on another dinosaur, from the face-up cards on the table, put the bone on it to say, okay, this bone I know is part of this dinosaur. I'm going to be working on this one. And then you can proceed to try to find the other bones later and add them to this card. But I like that you can't actually start to work on this goal until you find the bone to start working on it, because you've been digging. You're digging up dinosaur bones and finding, and once you find one, you're like, oh, okay, this is probably part of this dinosaur. I will continue working on discovering the rest of this dinosaur. And at the same time, one of the other things I like about this is that at any time you can say, I don't want to work on this dinosaur anymore. I want to work on a different dinosaur. And you can score the card for what you've earned so far. There are fewer points down here than the big point total you can get. Let's see if I can get that in focus up here. But you can, like in real life, I imagine, you could start to work on it and say, I want to work on another project. I'm going to give up on this one, but you don't get to move the bone over to another dinosaur. The bone is still part of this dinosaur, and so you just discard this card or set it aside for scoring. Actually, we scored later in the game. I think you're supposed to score right away. I don't think it matters all that much. So I really like that. What else here? Oh yeah, this was a neat little thing on the player mats. Let me see if I can find a player mat here as an example. So this is really cool. On the player mats, you start, and hopefully I can get this in focus. At the top of your mat, you have 3 slots for tools. And of course, I can't quite get that in focus. But what you can't see here is that there are points on here. So 3 slots, this says 2 points, this says 4 points. And you start with those, essentially at the beginning of the game, you start with those points. If the game ended right now, you would gain 6 points. However, as you get tools, you cover up those slots. And so you actually get fewer points, but the tools can make you more powerful. And so there's a nice decision point in here as to, okay, do I get tools and do I get them early enough that they actually make a significant difference in my score, or do I cover up my points? And there's also a sense of endowed progress. So I really like in games where at the very beginning of the game, you already start with something good. And in this case, you already start with 6 points that you would gain unless you end up covering them up. I thought that was really clever. I think I just have one other thing here. Yeah, the game timer. I love games that have kind of an organic game timer, and I thought they did really well here. The game timer is shown on this slot on the common points board. Basically, this is saying you're going to randomize 3 events over the course of the game, and on each of those events, you are going to put a plaster equal to the number of players times 4. So we were playing a 4-player game. We put 16 plaster on top of the top event card. And during the game, you need plaster to dig up bones. So we were going through this plaster a lot. When all the plaster on that card is gone, you reveal the event card, do whatever it says, and then put those 16 plaster back on the next event card. And then eventually you have no event card down there, and you put 16 plaster just on this board here. And when you're done with those, you play, I think, one more final round and you end the game. And so this is kind of an organic timer. As players are taking plaster, they're revealing these events and moving closer to the end of the game. But there's no, even though there's like essentially a set number of rounds, the time it takes to complete those rounds is organic. It's based on what players are doing in the game. I really like organic timers like that. There's more I could discuss here, but obviously I've already talked about a lot of different mechanisms that I admire and appreciate in Fossilis, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've played this game and have a mechanism that you really love and want to talk about it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Or if any of these mechanisms remind you of another game, I'd love to hear your thoughts about those games as well. Thanks.